Tonight, we are hours away from a partial government shutdown.
Drugs are pouring into our country. Human trafficking is at the all-time worst.
And the president is setting off a political panic in Washington. This after a House-passed bill with money to fund the president's long-promised border wall is expected to crash into a legislative wall in the Senate.
And we have won against ISIS. And now it's time for our troops to come back home.
And the president's unilateral decision to pull the U.S. military out of Syria and cut the number of troops in Afghanistan is setting off alarm bells on both sides of the aisle.
This isn't akin to surrendering.
All this and the president's announcement on Twitter that his defense secretary's tenure is coming to an end. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup. Jenna Browder has the night off. The weather in Washington is tepid, but a freeze in Congress has set in on this first day of winter. The president insisting that a government shutdown on this winter solstice will last, quote, a very long time if funding for a border wall is cast out of any measure to fund the government past midnight. Senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon has more on Washington, a city on edge tonight.
The House of Representatives voted 217 to 185, approving strong border security and the money necessary to take care of the barrier, wall, or steel slats, whatever you want to call it.
The president is unequivocal.
It was a tremendous evening for the Republicans, to be honest with you, because the level of spirit, the level of happiness, a lot of people came out, they said they have never seen, one man in particular, he's been there for over 20 years, he said, I've never seen spirit or enthusiasm like this.
We just had a very long, productive meeting with the president.
And on Thursday, after meeting with outgoing Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, he got an early Christmas gift.
And they voted, and it was an incredible vote. And we were told that you would never get the House to vote. Well, we were able to get the House to vote.
The House passed a stopgap funding measure to keep the government open through February. That includes $5.7 billion for the president's border security wall, along with nearly $9 billion in disaster relief.
Now the Senate is looking at it. We just had a meeting with some of our great senator Republicans and lasted for a long time. Tremendous enthusiasm.
Now it's on to the Senate, where it needs 60 votes to pass, and Democrats aren't budging.
President Trump is plunging the country into chaos, throwing a temper tantrum, and creating the Trump shutdown of the government.
The conservative House Freedom Caucus played a pivotal role in getting funding for the wall. Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows led the charge, calling on the president to reject a Senate compromise that did not include funding for the border wall.
Mr. President, we're going to back you up if you veto this bill.
Republicans and Democrats are both digging in and drawing up potential plans for deals while weighing the political fallout heading into a new Congress. But for the president, this is a play to his base that pressured him to stay true to his campaign promise.
There has to be a wall for one reason. The president promised a wall. This president is the first president that I've ever seen who keeps his promises, and it's a big part of why he was elected, and it's a big part of why people value him. This is a man of his word. He wouldn't have said it and ought not to have said it if he wasn't going to do it.
And if this latest deal doesn't yield billions for the border wall, Metaxas and plenty of other Trump supporters believe the president has the power to put up the wall unilaterally in the name of national security. John?
Thanks, Jennifer. Well, our congressional correspondent Abigail Robertson joins us now for some insight into the inner workings of Capitol Hill. Abby, I imagine it has to be a little crazy up there with everything being down to the wire.
Yes, that is very true, John. Lawmakers do not know when they might be going home, and there are certainly a lot of negotiations going on in Capitol Hill right now, and people are very much on edge about this midnight partial government shutdown deadline approaching.
Abby, this morning the president tweeted, "Mitch, use the nuclear option and get it done. Our country is counting on you." He also tweeted this: "Thank you at Steve Daines for being willing to go with the so-called nuclear option in order to win the desperately needed border security. Have my total support." Abby, based on what you're hearing, is that likely to happen?
You know, John, at this point, there are very few things we can definitively rule off the table, but I think invoking the nuclear option to get the budget funding for the border wall and a budget bill passed is one of them. While Majority Leader Mitch McConnell used this to get Supreme Court confirmations passed with a simple majority of 51 votes, he has rejected using it a number of times the past 2 years for other legislation, and already a substantial amount of Republican senators have come out saying they would not vote in support of going nuclear, as they say, in order to pass a budget bill, because they know one day soon down the line they could be in the minority and that decision would come back to haunt them. And longtime Senator Orrin Hatch tweeted this morning that eliminating the filibuster would be a mistake, saying it's inconvenient sometimes, but requiring compromise is in the interest of both parties in the long term. And I think a lot of senators feel that way.
Well, speaking of shutdowns, this is the third down-to-the-wire government shutdown threat since 2016. I know you recently spoke to a senator who's trying to prevent the country from ever being in this situation again. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, I recently spoke with Senator James Lankford, who told me that the only people who like these threats of government shutdowns are the media. And while it makes great TV to see the president bring Chuck and Nancy, as he calls them, to the White House to argue about the budget and funding and who would be to blame for a partial government shutdown, it is bad for the country and for American people. So Senator Lankford has introduced a bill that would make only lawmakers on the hook and make only lawmakers face the consequences if the government shuts down. Take a look.
For years, I have fought against this whole principle of having government shutdown fights. I just don't think they help us as a nation. I don't think they help us internationally. I don't think they help us with our own economy even. When you're constantly fighting about a government shutdown, then you're always distracted over what the real issues are. So I have a bill that stops the government shutdowns that basically says if the funding is not done in place, the budgets are not done, the next step, the appropriation bills are not done, Congress has to stay in session until it gets done. But we have automatic funding that happens the same as last year's funding that keeps going until Congress resolves. But at the same time, Congress has to stay here until they get the next year's funding. So basically the American people are not held hostage. Congress is. That Congress has to be able to stay here and to be able to get its work done rather than it's not done, so we do these government shutdown fights or extensions and the American people go through all the turmoil. Let's put the pressure where the pressure needs to be. There are a lot of folks that nod their heads, but when it comes time to vote on it, they'll say no, they don't. So we have a lot of Republicans that are supportive of it right now. We don't have a lot of Democrats that are on board with it yet. I hope to be able to get that. This isn't good for anybody at any place at any time. Whether Republicans or Democrats are in charge, we need to be able to make sure the pressure stays on Congress rather than the pressure being on the American people.
How likely is this amendment that it would pass?
In this deeply partisan political climate where we're seeing these threats of shutdowns all too often, maybe Americans will get frustrated enough that they put pressure on lawmakers to pass something like this.
Abigail Robertson reporting on Capitol Hill. Thanks, Abby. In the midst of all this shutdown drama, the search for a new defense secretary begins after the president's announcement last night in a tweet that General James Mattis is stepping down. That bombshell after it was revealed the president is planning a full U.S. military pullout in Syria and to cut in half the number of American troops fighting in Afghanistan. Here once more is senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon.
And we have won.
The president's decision to pull 2,000 U.S. troops out of Syria came days before Christmas, when Washington typically slows down. Even Trump's staunchest supporters criticize his Syria decision.
We've got two choices to fight this war. In their backyard or our backyard.
But that wasn't the only foreign policy bomb to drop. Reports that the administration is preparing to draw down half its current troop level in Afghanistan to 7,000. This as the president announced on Twitter that Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis is leaving.
Mad Dog Mattis.
The president made Mattis a close ally early on, but the two butted heads on the importance of America's international alliances like NATO. The final straw was the president's announcement that he's bringing home 2,000 troops from Syria.
I have a very good relationship with him. I had lunch with him 2 days ago. I have a very good relationship with him. It could be that he is. I think he's sort of a Democrat, if you want to know the truth.
The president was asked about Mattis in October on 60 Minutes, and he didn't shut the door on whether he might leave.
General Mattis is a good guy. We get along very well. He may leave. I mean, at some point, Everybody leaves. Everybody. People leave. That's Washington.
He and the president have a good relationship, but sometimes they disagree.
Reaction to Mattis's resignation has even the president's supporters concerned about the future of foreign policy. Just read General Mattis' resignation letter. It makes it abundantly clear that we are headed towards a series of grave policy errors, which will endanger our nation, tweets Senator Marco Rubio. And in a statement, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell writes, "It is regrettable that the president must now choose a new Secretary of Defense, but I urge him to select a leader who shares Secretary Mattis's total commitment to America's service members." In his resignation letter, Mattis writes, "Because you have the right to a Secretary of Defense whose views are better aligned with yours on these and other subjects, I believe it is right for me to step down from my position."
Thanks, Jennifer. Well, here to help us deconstruct all of that and explore this a little bit further is CBN's chief political analyst, David Brody. David, I'm going to use a word that we were using yesterday in a text exchange about what was happening, which is wow.
Right.
Can you help explain some of these moves that the president has been making?
Well, there's so many. I mean, we really have to break it down. We're talking about Mattis there, but of course, Syria, Afghanistan, all of this. Look, this shouldn't come as any surprise to anybody, if you think about it, John. I mean, he has talked about not being the world's policeman. He's talked about isolationism. He didn't call it that, but that's really what he is. And so for a lot of folks to say, what in the world are you doing? Well, I would just say, in a pushback to a degree, what did you expect? I mean, this is a guy, the president, at the time, candidate Trump, who basically said he was ready to get out of Syria, and that's what he's doing.
One of the key questions we're always trained to ask is the timing. So can you help explain the timing of the sudden nature of some of these tweets?
Well, not really.
You can't get it. Well, you've interviewed him. You know him. You've interviewed him a number of times, so maybe you can help more than most.
Right,
Putting you on the spot?
No, that's fine. Look, I think it all comes down to dollars, and some people would not say cents, so to speak, but definitely dollars. And here's why. Look, when the whole Saudi Arabia kerfuffle with MBS was going on, what did Trump talk about? It was through the prism of money. Hey, they're helping us with the arms deal, right? Look at this situation. Why are we the world's policemen? Right, over there. We could save millions of dollars by getting out of Syria. Then even with NATO, paying their fair share. Everything is about dollars with Trump, which you can make the argument that can make America great again, but as we know, especially from a Christian perspective, it's not just about money. As a matter of fact, it really shouldn't be about money. It should be about values and things much broader than just money.
Let's go back to Syria. He has tweeted that we've defeated Syria. Some, even in his own party, say that that's not true. So where is the gap? Why this disparity?
Well, he's saying they've defeated ISIS because at one point in 2014, ISIS controlled 1/3 of Syria and Iraq. Now, basically, they control about 1% or so of Syria. So he's going to say, hey, we succeeded, we're out. The problem is with that 1%, even the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff will basically tell you that there's that part of northeastern Syria where they want to train 35 to 40,000 troops. The problem is they've only got about 20% of them trained, so that's a problem. And also along the Euphrates River in eastern Syria, also that is a stronghold of ISIS. So is ISIS totally defeated? No. But with Donald Trump, it's usually it's very binary with Donald Trump.
I misspoke. Thank you for correcting me. I meant ISIS, not Syria. So what kind of political impact do you think this might have on Trump, his presidency, and the administration?
I think it's a real challenge for him. Look, the Democrats are against him, and now you've got basically mainstream conservatives against him on Syria, Afghanistan, a lot of these. And if you think about it, you've got his generals, if you will, and some of the folks in the national security team frustrated with him. So you have a lot of his friends and allies, it used to be his friends and allies, are now frustrated with him. That leaves him to be a very lonely and isolated president going into 2019. Not a good place for Donald Trump to be, but clearly he'll be on Twitter and we'll just follow it along.
David, thank you for helping break all that down for us.
You bet, John. Thank you.
All right. Well, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is recovering from surgery tonight. The 85-year-old had cancerous growths removed from her lung. The Supreme Court released a statement saying she was treated today at a hospital in New York and that doctors found no evidence of the disease lingering or spreading elsewhere. You may recall Ginsburg suffered a fall early last month, breaking several ribs. Doctors spotted the growths through x-rays and caught it in the early stages. Ginsburg has twice beaten cancer before, being treated for colorectal cancer and early-stage pancreatic cancer. Despite the setback, she shows no signs of slowing down. Ginsburg has hired Supreme Court clerks for the next 2 terms And just last week, at a screening of a feature film based on her legal career, said she planned to remain on the bench, quote, as long as I can do it full steam. Coming up, why a Democratic lawmaker is scrambling to fix a little-known provision in the Republican tax cut plan that targets churches and other nonprofits over parking. We talk to Delaware Senator Chris Coons when we come back. Welcome back. A harsh warning from the leader of the Catholic Church today: convert and hand yourself over to human justice. Pope Francis gave that order during his annual Christmas speech at the Vatican, demanding priests who've molested children to turn themselves in to the proper authorities and ultimately prepare for what he called divine justice. During the address, he promised not to dismiss or attempt to silence any future cases, while acknowledging the Church's past mistakes handling clergy abuse. His remarks round out a difficult year with thousands of sexual abuse allegations at the hands of priests and religious leaders around the world. Pope Francis is convening an abuse prevention summit in February to show the Catholic Church's commitment to helping victims. Well, after years decrying its effect on political speech, the House handed a victory to a cause championed by conservatives and churches. Republican lawmakers voted to repeal the Johnson Amendment, a measure long used to penalize churches and other religious groups. It allows the IRS to audit Christian ministries and nonprofits, as well as withhold tax-exempt status for political activity. Faith and Freedom Coalition's President Ralph Reed responded, saying, repealing the Johnson Amendment will restore the right to political speech by pastors, churches, and ministries. The repeal is part of a larger bill extending tax relief and protecting retirement savings. It also clarifies churches don't need to pay taxes on employee benefits like parking spots. The bill still needs to be passed by the Senate. Well, this week, the House passed a measure clarifying churches don't have to pay taxes on employee benefits, as I was saying, like those parking spots, but the bill still needs to clear the Senate. Our Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson spoke with Democrat Senator Chris Coons on the work being done to address this issue and another one that could cost churches and nonprofits billions.
The tax bill had some unintended, let's hope, consequences, very negative consequences for all houses of worship and nonprofits in terms of unrelated business income tax, or UBIT. This is a little technical, but they have to keep records of and file for the first time benefits like free parking or free meals or access to exercise facilities that were not previously taxable. So let's imagine, you know, I'm the new associate pastor at a homeless shelter or a soup kitchen. We now have to file with the government that I get free parking, which is not something we've ever taken account of. If I'm the cantor at a synagogue, if I'm the, you know, imam doing youth programming at a mosque, like, we have to document and account for the fact that we have a youth center where I also work out with our youth program, you know, after school. I do not think this was what was intended. And so Senator Langford and I, and he really got the ball rolling and helped clarify our approach on this. I think James deserves a lot of credit for raising this. We've raised this issue with Treasury. My other shared concern with him, and it's a big concern, is that some of the changes in the last tax bill will reduce charitable giving. There's lots of folks who give to nonprofits in their community out of the tax benefits. Well, for tens of millions of Americans, those tax benefits went away. And so there's a lot of concern from the nonprofit community about what will this mean for charitable giving. So there's two issues, the new recording and reporting burden on houses of worship and the real potential impact on charitable giving.
And nonprofits will be on the hook for these new taxes this year unless the bill clears both chambers of Congress. Well, even with broad bipartisan support, it still barely made it to the president's desk. When we come back, more on today's signing of the most significant criminal justice reform bill in decades. Criminal justice reform became law today with a stroke of the president's pen. It's a major bipartisan legislative accomplishment supporters celebrated during a signing ceremony in the Oval Office.
I want to give all glory to God, because God is why we are standing here together right now. When I was in federal prison for 3 years, there was no hope. There was no programming. There was nothing for anyone. We didn't have, as a woman who was incarcerated, we fought to make sure we had sanitary napkins and hygiene products to us. There's sisters like Pamela Wynn who lost her baby because she was shackled during child labor. And now this will all end. And my sisters and brothers who are presently incarcerated and watching, because they have called me all morning. We have been fighting and we will continue to fight, and this is just a first step. We are looking forward to continuing to work with you, President, and to make sure that our people will have everything that they need when they come home so that we can all have an opportunity to transform our lives.
The law aimed to address the nation's exploding prison population as a result of the decades-old war on drugs. Well, we here at Faith Nation and CBN News are in a unique position to bring you the news from a Christian perspective. It's something that we don't at all take lightly. So we also, though, manage to have a little bit of fun behind the scenes when you're not looking. Take a look. Hello and welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
Bingo. Take 25.
Well, that is going to do. Sorry, my voice cracked.
We should stick to it, huh?
Yeah.
Have you heard about the new restaurant called Karma? Don't worry about it. There's no menu. You get what you deserve.
Now golf clap.
Cool. Hey, I know who that is. I saw you.
Okay, we're done then.
We're going to have to talk to the producer to see who gave him clearance for that. Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation. Have a great weekend.